Nobody talks about Ray Kowalski at medical conferences. His name doesn't appear in any journal. He has no published research, no Instagram page, no waiting list that stretches 6 months. He doesn't have a receptionist. He doesn't have a business card. What he has is a phone number, and depending on who you are, that number is either the most guarded secret in 3 states or the one thing standing between you and a life you thought was over. The wealthy know him the way old money knows its accountant. Quietly, carefully, with a kind of possessive gratitude they'd never say out loud at a dinner party. They found him through whispers. A hedge fund manager in Greenwich whose wife walked again after 2 years in a chair. A retired senator whose son stopped shaking. A woman in Scottsdale who had spent $400,000 on specialists across 5 cities before someone slid a napkin across a table at a charity gala and said, "Just call this number. Don't ask me how I got it, just call." They called, and their lives changed. And then they did exactly what they were told to do. They said nothing. But the poor always find him too. That's the part nobody understands. That's the part that doesn't make any logical sense if you look at it from the outside. Because Ray Kowalski lives in Denton, Texas, in a house that needs a new roof, drives a 2009 Ford F-150 with a cracked side mirror, and charges people with money so much that some of them actually pause before writing the check, and charges people without money exactly nothing. Not a sliding scale, not a reduced fee, nothing. The first time Sandra Myers heard his name, she was sitting in the parking lot of a Walgreens in Fort Worth, crying so hard she couldn't read the label on a prescription bottle she couldn't afford to fill anyway. Her daughter, Maya, was 11 years old and had been losing feeling in her legs for 8 months. 3 neurologists, 2 orthopedic surgeons, 1 specialist flown in from Johns Hopkins who spent 40 minutes with Maya, billed their insurance $4,000, and told Sandra that the condition was likely degenerative and that they would monitor it closely, as if watching her daughter disappear was a treatment plan. Sandra was 34. She worked the early shift at a distribution center, 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then picked Maya up from her sister's house, made dinner, helped with homework that Maya could still do sitting up, and tried not to think about what monitoring it closely actually meant in practical terms. It meant a wheelchair eventually. It meant a life narrowed down to what could be reached from a seated position. It meant Maya at 30, at 40, looking out a window at a world that had been decided for her before she was old enough to fight back. The name Ray Kowalski came from a woman named Denise who worked the same shift at the distribution center and had a cousin in Denton whose neighbor's kid had something wrong with his spine. Sandra didn't even fully listen when Denise told her. She was tired. She was always tired. But Denise wrote the number on the back of a receipt and pressed it into Sandra's hand before they clocked out, and Sandra put it in her jacket pocket and forgot about it for 11 days. She found it when she was doing laundry. She almost threw it away. She stood over the trash can for a long moment. Another name. Another person who was probably selling something. Probably offering some supplement or some therapy that would cost money she didn't have him produce. Results she'd stopped believing in. She had been disappointed so many times in the last 8 months. That disappointment had started to feel like her natural state, like the background radiation of her life. She called anyway. He picked up on the second ring. No office voice, no professional courtesy distance, just a man who said yeah and listened while she talked. She told him everything, the timeline, the symptoms, the diagnoses, the drugs Maya had tried, the physical therapy that helped for 3 weeks and then stopped helping. The night 6 weeks ago when Maya woke up crying because she couldn't feel her feet at all, and Sandra had sat on the edge of her daughter's bed at 2 in the morning and promised her it was going to be okay, while having absolutely no reason to believe that was true. Ray didn't say anything for a moment after she finished. Then he said, "Can you bring her Saturday?" Sandra said she didn't have money. She said it the way people say things they're ashamed of, quickly, getting it out before courage failed. He said he knew. He said, "Come anyway." She drove 2 hours on a Saturday morning, with Maya in the passenger seat and the heat on because Maya said her legs felt better when they were warm. They pulled up to a house in a neighborhood that was not poor but was not rich either. The kind of neighborhood where people mow their own lawns and know their neighbors' names. There was a man sitting on the front step drinking coffee who looked like he fixed things for a living, which Sandra would later learn was exactly what he had done for 20 years before. Any of this started. He was maybe 50. Big hands, gray at the temples. He stood up when they pulled in and walked to the car and opened Maya's door and said, "You must be Maya, I'm Ray. You want to come inside?" What happened over the next 3 hours? Sandra has tried to describe to people and found that language keeps failing her. It wasn't magic. It wasn't anything that looked from the outside like what she'd expected. He didn't have a table with stirrups or machines that beeped or a whiteboard covered in diagrams. He had a regular room with good light and a chair that he'd clearly built himself from wood, wide and low. And he sat across from Maya and talked to her for a long time, before he touched her at all. He asked her questions that no one had asked. Not what does it feel like when you can't feel anything. He asked her what she noticed first in the morning, before she was fully awake. He asked her what she'd been doing in the 2 weeks before it started. He asked her about school, about stress, about a fight she'd mentioned having with her best friend. He asked her where she felt safe and where she didn't. Sandra sat in the corner and watched her daughter talk to this man the way Maya hadn't talked to anyone in 8 months, openly, without the careful management of a sick child trying not to worry her mother. Then he worked on her. Sandra still doesn't have the right vocabulary for it. It was bodywork and it wasn't. It was structural and it was something else. His hands moved along Maya's spine and her hips and the base of her skull with a precision that looked unhurried but missed nothing. He explained what he was doing in plain language, not performing expertise but actually communicating, the way a good mechanic explains what's wrong with your car, without making you feel stupid for not already knowing. He said at some point without looking up that the nervous system is not a machine, but everyone treats it like one. He said the body keeps a ledger of everything that frightened it, everything that compressed it, every impact and every grief. And sometimes the ledger gets so full that something stops conducting correctly. He said the 3 neurologists were not wrong about what they saw. They were just looking at the last page of a very long story and calling it the whole book. Maya fell asleep on the chair toward the end. A deep, slack sleep, the kind Sandra hadn't seen her daughter slip into since before all this started. When she woke up, she said her feet felt warm. Sandra drove home, telling herself not to read too much into it. One session, a good day. Maya said her feet felt warm, not that she was healed, not that anything was fixed. Sandra had learned the hard way what hope could cost, and she rationed it now like a resource she couldn't afford to waste. But Maya slept through the night, and the next morning she walked from her bedroom to the kitchen without holding the wall. They went back 3 more times over the next 6 weeks. Each time Ray met them on the step with coffee for Sandra and whatever Maya had said she wanted, and the second time it was a specific brand of orange juice he'd apparently gone and bought. Each time something shifted, not dramatically, not in the way of miracles that announce themselves, in the way of a door that has been stuck for a long time finally moving on its hinges. Small at first, then more. Then one afternoon Maya ran, actually ran, in the backyard. For no reason except that she could, her arms out, laughing, and Sandra sat on Ray's back step and did not try to stop herself from crying. She asked him that day, finally asked directly, why he did it this way. The wealthy patients and the free ones. The hidden number and the open door. She asked him where that line came from. He was quiet for a moment. He was watching Maya in the yard. Then he said that he had a daughter. Had, past tense. She got sick when she was 9, and they didn't have money, and by the time he understood what was actually wrong with her, the kind of wrong that all the expensive tests had missed because they were looking for the wrong thing, it was too late to do anything about it. He spent the next 12 years learning what he wished he'd known. Every system, every method, every framework that conventional medicine had discarded or not yet reached. He did it because there was nothing else he could do with the grief. He said you either let it bury you or you build something out of it. He said he charges the people who can pay, because the work is real and real work has value, and he is not ashamed of that. He said he doesn't charge people like Sandra because his daughter didn't get what she needed because of money, and he decided a long time ago that was going to stop with him in whatever small radius he could manage. Sandra didn't say anything for a long time. Maya was still running in the yard. The late afternoon light was doing something generous to everything it touched. She thought about the napkin at the charity gala she'd never attended. She thought about the hedge fund wife who walked again. She thought about a phone number that moved through the world in 2 completely different directions. simultaneously, passed between people with everything and people with nothing, somehow finding the ones who needed it most on both ends. She thought about a little girl Ray never mentions by name. The whole architecture of what he'd built. All the wealthy clients who funded it without knowing they were funding it. All the people like Maya who walked back into their lives through a door that was supposed to be closed. All of it resting on the foundation of one loss that he never got over and stopped trying to get over. The last time Sandra saw him, Maya was 12 and running track at her middle school. She'd driven back to say thank you in person because a phone call felt insufficient. He was on the front step again, same coffee, same cracked mirror truck in the driveway. She gave him a card that Maya had made, drawings on the front and handwriting inside that Sandra hadn't read because it was between Maya and him. He read it on the step while Sandra watched. His face did something she looked away from because it was too private to witness. She got in her car. She pulled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, she could see him still sitting there, holding the card, and she thought about all the things that money can build and all the things it cannot, and about a man with a dead daughter and a cracked mirror and hands that knew how to find the last page of a long story and read it all the way back to the beginning, and about how the most important phone number she ever received was written on a receipt for things she couldn't afford by a woman who barely knew her, because that is how the real things travel, not through press releases or recommendation, algorithms or charity galas, but hand-to-hand in parking lots, between tired people who still believe, even after everything, that it is worth passing something good forward into a world that doesn't always deserve it but needs it anyway.